The land explored by our ancestors extends from the Altai to the White Sea. The scientific expedition, Trails of Nomads, continues to unveil the path of our forefathers. A group of scientists led by pilgrim of the 21st century, Saparis Kakov, has already visited more than 50 countries. Scientists reveal the exciting secrets of the past. Watch an amazing story of a great journey in the Trails of Nomads program. Today's Trails of Nomads episode presents Kublai Khan's campaigns in Japan were led by Kipchak warlords. What documents confirm it? What important position did Kipchak Tutuk occupy in the Mongol Empire? How do Japanese scientists evaluate the technological achievements of our ancestors? Japan, located on the islands of the Pacific Ocean, was a separate country until the 13th century. It did not come into conflict with anyone and developed independently. The state was never threatened by the enemy. It was located on islands far from the mainland. But in the 13th century, peace was disturbed. The grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai, decided to conquer the archipelago. Ancestors of the Kazakhs, immigrants from the Great Steppe, were among the commanders of his army. To learn more about these events, the Trails of Nomads scientific expedition went to the city of Fukuoka.
Қытайлардың қолжазбаларында жазылған Монголдардың армиясының басқару.
As described in Chinese manuscripts, the Mongol army was led by Mongols, Kipchaks, and Kanglis. Tutuk and Baitamir were among them. They reached a high position in the army and were close to the emperor.
Шыққан қолбасшылар өте көп болды. Оның ішінде атай кетуге болады. Мысалы, мына Tutuk дейді, Байтемир. Олар өте жоғары дәрежеге шейін жеткен императордың оң қолы болды деп десуге де болады.
Fukuoka is a port city in the north of Kyushu. Due to its proximity to the mainland, it was the first to suffer a blow of the enemy. A large army of Kublai, through the Hakata Bay, attacked the Japanese islands. On the coast, there are tombstones of those who died in that bloody battle. To establish trade and economic relations in the 60s, 70s of the 13th century, Kublai Khan sent his ambassadors to Japan. At that time, a military government dominated here, which refused to negotiate with the Mongols. Ambassadors were killed and the Mongols initiated the invasion. The death of ambassadors greatly angered Kublai. In a rage, he ordered the immediate preparation for a trip to Japan. At that time, the grandson of famous Genghis Khan was proclaimed ruler of the Mongol Empire. The capital was moved from Karakorum to Hanbalik, present-day Beijing. The state received a new Chinese name, the Yuan Empire. The masters of Korea and China produced weapons, ships, and all necessary equipment for the army of Kublai. On land, the army of Kublai was the most powerful. What could not be said about the fleet? Responsibility for its development was assigned to the Kipchak commanders. At that time, the military aristocracy of the Mongolian troops was mainly represented by immigrants from the Turkic tribes, Naimans, Kanglis, Jalairs, and Kipchaks. Turkic tribes, particularly the Kipchaks, were considered a military elite in Kublai's empire. There were not many of them, but each Kipchak was worth a dozen ordinary warriors. They were skilled riders and masterfully possessed various types of weapons and tactics. Therefore, almost always Kipchaks were promoted to leadership positions. However, the Japanese did not divide the enemies into Kipchaks, Chinese, and Koreans. For them, they were all Mongol invaders. Therefore, there is little information about the Turkic military leaders in our manuscripts. In Chinese manuscripts, on the contrary, there is a lot of information about Turkic military leaders who held high military posts in the army of Kublai. They made their significant contribution to the campaign in Japan. One of the prominent military leaders was Tutuk. This is the grandson of Inas Khan, authoritative in the Mongolian army. Kublai Khan did not particularly trust the Mongols because they constantly rebelled and started uprisings. Therefore, next to the Han, there were more Kipchaks and Alans. They had high ranks at the court of the Yuan dynasty. Kipchak commander Tutuk was the second leader after the Khan in the country. Dashti Kipchak warriors heroically defended Oturar, Siganak, and other cities. Their fame and courage spread throughout the world. That is why the Mongol Emperor invited Turkic military leaders to high-ranking posts in his state. Both Tutuk and his sons were the closest people to the emperor. There were 10,000 warriors subordinate to the Kipchak commander. This detachment performed only special tasks. Kublai sent Tutuk to Japan. He had high hopes for him. In the fall of 1274, about 900 ships arrived from Korea to the Hakata Bay, where we are now, across the island of Tsushima. Of these, 20,000 soldiers were Chinese, 6,000 Koreans, and the Mongols and Turks were military leaders. In total, there were about 40,000 people. By order of the commander of the Japanese forces, Kamakura, all samurai were involved in the defense. However, it was very difficult to confront the army of Kublai. As a result, the island of Kyushu was captured and all the samurai were killed. This trip of the scientific expedition took place during the Sakura blossom season. But recording an interview with Morikawa Tatsuya on the coast failed. The weather has made adjustments. It was very volatile on the island. The army of Kublai also faced this several centuries ago. Otherwise, how to explain the hasty departure of the army, which was practically at the gates of the imperial palace? After the first day of the battle, the Japanese realized that they were doomed to defeat. However, the next day, the enemy left the island. Not a single Mongolian ship was left. There are two possible reasons why the army of Kublai left the island. The first is Hurricane Kamikaze, but as the locals say, it could not be in November. It can only be in the summer. The second reason, the purpose of Kublai Khan in this campaign was only a demonstration of his strength. He had no plans to seize the island. After the first campaign, Kublai again sent his ambassadors. However, the Japanese authorities killed them again. They were sure that now the Mongols would not be able to approach their shores since a stone wall was built. Its height was 2.5 meters and a length reached more than 20 kilometers.
Екінші рет 1281 жылы екінші рет жорық болған уақытында мынандай жарлар пайда болды.
The second campaign took place in 1281. The Japanese knew that the enemy would come again and they had been preparing for this for about 8 years. All inhabitants of the island united to erect a stone wall. However, Japan was saved not by wall, but by the hurricane Kamikaze.
Жар жасаған өте алмайтын, бірақ оларды құтқара алмады. Бұларды құтқарған тек қана мынау үлкен дауыл. Оның атын бұлар камикадзе деп атаған.
If not for a crushing storm, who knows what would have happened to Japan? After all, the Mongol invaders prepared for the second campaign even more thoroughly. In 1276, the army of Kublai conquered the south of China, where ship production was established. This allowed him to restore and strengthen the navy.
Үлкен кемелермен келді. Онда ат та бар ішінде, содан кейін мынау үлкен
The Mongols arrived in large ships. They brought horses with them. Ships were full of guns and giant bows, which were pulled by more than 10 people. That is, they were well armed.
тартатын. Ну, енді әбден сондай құралданған.
In the spring of 1281, the army of the Yuan Empire set off on another campaign. The first on the way was Hakata Bay, but the stone wall built by the Japanese blocked the path of the Mongol cavalry. The Turkic military leaders changed the battle plan and turned the army to Takashima Island. They easily defeated locals, but returning to Hakata Bay, they were again struck by formidable natural disaster. During the second trip, unlike the first, the Mongols had a large quantitative advantage. Only Korea provided 900 ships and about 40,000 soldiers, as south of China allocated 3,500 ships and 100,000 soldiers. The total number of soldiers was more than 142,000 people. This time, the typhoon really saved the Japanese. Kublai's army suffered heavy losses. Fragments of medieval ships and weapons are still found in the area of Takashima Island. All this is stored in Japanese museums. Most of the exhibits found by archaeologists during underwater research are kept in the Folk Museum in Fukuoka. The search for the ships of Kublai Khan fleet began back in the 80s of the last century. During this time, many valuable items were found, including various weapons, stone shots for guns, sabers, arrows, household items made of clay, the seal of the Mongol military commander. Now, Japanese scientists are conducting a thorough analysis of the seal, which has the inscription 1277.
Ал енді мынау қарап тұрғанымыз қазір міне теңіздің астынан табылған ядро дөңгелек ішінде.
This is the stone shot found in the sea. It contained explosives. They are of different sizes. These are the little ones. The Japanese lost precisely because of these weapons. They exploded and burned everything around. For the Japanese, this turned out to be a very formidable weapon, which they encountered for the first time. They were made by the Chinese.
Олар үріккеннен, аттары үріккеннен өздері де сол үлкен қару болыпты. Мына Қытайлардың қаруы, оны монғолдар пайдаланған.
Even the samurai feared the army of Kublai Khan. Representatives of the highest military unit before the battle necessarily came to the temple to pray. Members of the expedition trails of nomads visited one of these temples, the staff members of which warmly greeted Kazakhstan's scientists. Near the temple, there is a stone sculpture of Nichiren, the founder of one of the Buddhist movements. It turns out that he prophesied the campaign of the Mongol conquerors and warned the government about it. However, then no one listened to him. After the prophecy came true, the number of temple visitors increased markedly. This is where the samurai come and pray to God. Bloody war did not spare anyone. Everything was on fire, even temples burned. Some of them are now restored. Monuments testifying to the terrible war were erected on the territory of many places of worship. Artifacts found during archaeological excavations are stored in the museum. The Japanese have great respect for their history. The exhibits of this museum are very close to the Kazakhs. They're all made in the Turkic style. Japanese scientists highly value the advanced technologies that our ancestors used. Each exhibit relating to the Mongol invasion of our country is very valuable to us. They give us an idea of the technological revolution in the military sphere of Central Asia. We carefully study all these historical sources. Historical sources relating to the Kublai campaign are stored in the Hakuzaki Shrine. Here is a museum dedicated to those events. Judging by the exhibits of the museum, the fleet of Kublai Khan was quite powerful. A huge stone anchor speaks of the impressive size of the ship. According to scientists, their length reached 40 meters. Archaeologists are still exploring the depths of the sea. According to some manuscripts, off the coast of the Japanese archipelago, about 4,000 ships sank, more than 70,000 soldiers died. The typhoon saved the Japanese.
The
shrine played an important role during the Mongol invasion. It made a great contribution to strengthening the spirit of the samurai. Warriors before the battle came here to pray. It was impossible to resist the army led by the Turkic military leaders. Therefore, the Japanese prayed, asking for help from their god, thus raising the spirit of their warriors. The Japanese people, since ancient times, believed that they could withstand any enemy. People hoped for a god who could make them stronger than enemies. According to local historians, the war with the Mongols left a big mark in the history of the country. It influenced the consciousness of local residents for a long time, until the Second World War. Kublai's campaigns caused great damage to Japan, but nevertheless there were positive aspects. The Japanese first rallied in the fight against the enemy. Samurai came to the south from all over this country and stood up to defend their land. In 2016, Japanese scientists discovered another valuable historical fact. Prior to this, historians believed that the army of Kublai completely died. According to manuscripts, almost all the soldiers drowned and those who survived were killed by the Japanese. Recently, it turned out that there were warriors who survived during those events. Among them were the Turks, and now, perhaps, their descendants live here. After a hurricane at sea, about 30,000 soldiers of the Mongolian army landed on one of the Japanese islands. However, they were forced to surrender. All were sentenced to death. We thought so until 2016. We managed to find information about the survivors. Turns out that not everyone was executed. The most educated warriors were left alive. Later, they contributed to the development of the Japanese state. This was the reason for the new research. The Japanese people treat all the milestones of their history with equal respect and reverence. The proof are these stone monuments on the island of Shikanoshima in the south of Fukuoka. The Mongol warriors that died in a bloody battle are buried here. It seems that many soldiers left on this island. Many ships sank. Warriors tried to survive here for about 7 months. Since there was no reinforcements, the detachment had to surrender. These stones which are behind me are set up as tombstones. This is a Buddhist religion. This whole complex consists of 5 parts. Now we're on the highest of them, on the mountain. The stone was installed a long time ago, but after the earthquake, all the stones fell. Then they were installed on the coast of the sea. According to the Japanese, Kublai's campaign against their country contributed to the unification of the people. Everyone rallied to fight the formidable enemy, noble feudal lords, and the military elite.
この出来事について学ぼうと、中央アジアの国カザフスタンから研究団の一行が福岡にやってきました。
The work of the scientific expedition Shells of Nomads in Japan was under the scrutiny of the local press. Media representatives praised the desire of the Kazakh people to know their national history. As ancient wisdom says, a people who know and honor their history will have a great future.